Happy birthday to whoever is watching this on their birthday. This one goes out to you. I'm so tired of routes in Fire Emblem. Prepare yourselves, I'm about to sound like a boomer, an old soul. Some may call me a Fire Emblem elitist. And hey, you know what? I am pretty elite. You're right, thanks for the compliment. If you don't know Fire Emblem, why are you watching this video? I've tried explaining Fire Emblem to people who don't understand video games at all, and they just look at me and ask, why don't you just play chess instead? Because then I can't make my pawn and my bishop But honestly, if you don't know Fire Emblem, do a little research. In 1990, the worst thing happened. The live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie released. But at least we got Kiki's Delivery Service in English that year, that's a plus. Oh, also, Japan got Fire Emblem 1 that year, and it sold pretty darn good, which led them to make a sequel in 1992, Fire Emblem Gaiden. The game that changed everything, the first game in the series to have split routes, something that would become a staple in later entries, a staple that would cause me to make this video. The series would continue making short diverging paths in their stories, with Fire Emblem Thracia 776, Fire Emblem The Binding Blade, and Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones. Then, everything changed with the 14th entry in the series, Fire Emblem Fates, the first game in the series to sell 2 separate games for one title, Birthright and Conquest, while also releasing a third title, Revelation. Each game would feature the main character going a different route, taking a different side in a war, and if the player wanted to experience the entire story, they would need to buy 3 separate games. They were really Pokemoning the series. Honestly, in 2015, I was super open to this idea, simply because I thought the story would benefit from it. Wow, I exclaimed. 3 versions with plot differences must mean they're creating a high-quality story. The story for Fire Emblem Fates must be second to none. A story that'll define a generation. A story that'll change the world. We all know how that went. Prior to release, there was a ton of criticism towards the game. Birthright and Conquest cost $40 each, and then $20 for the final canon route in Revelation. Meaning, if someone wanted to experience the entire story, the entire world of Fates, they would have to dish out 100 greens. The most offensive part of Fates is that Birthright and Conquest, the 2 games that cost full price at the time, weren't even considered canon. The canon route, Revelation, whose story is actually the most offensive part of Fates, was half the price of Birthright and Conquest, and it didn't even launch until a few weeks later. What? Fire Emblem fans were just out there playing fanfiction while waiting for the inferior game with the real story to come out. Why wasn't it there day one? You know, I give Fates shit, but I really do enjoy the trilogy, specifically Conquest. The story is pretty lame, but the gameplay, the maps, and even some of the characters are all pretty bangin'. I really appreciate that, despite having 3 separate playthroughs, it never felt too stale. Reused maps always had some neat version-exclusive mechanics, and beyond the story, there was enough originality in each game to have it stand on its own. I'm not going to turn this into a Fates review, but just know that my hurtful words come from a place of love. That's something my ex always told me, at least. After Fates, Fire Emblem fans were understandably worried. Is this how every Fire Emblem game would be from now on? Is Fire Emblem the new Pokemon? Will incest still be a thing in the next game? Fortunately, no, and surprisingly, no. Fire Emblem Fates was an oddity. Perhaps because Nintendo was struggling with Wii U sales at the time, they thought they could milk us Fire Emblem fans dry? Well, they were right. I have lactation insufficiency now. Guess I'm never having kids. Probably for the best. Fire Emblem fans should not breed. This was the beginning of our route issue in Fire Emblem games. Fates started it all. Who would have guessed? Time moved on and the next mainline Fire Emblem appeared, Fire Emblem Echoes: Shadows of Valentia. This golden gem was a remake of Fire Emblem Gaiden, the second game in the series. You know, that game I mentioned earlier. Because the original had routes, of course the remake will. The routes found in this game are far less controversial and lame. This is actually how they should handle routes, IMO. The game follows Alm and Celica, two lovers who were separated as children. They both vanquish the political and religious evil of the world on their quest and eventually reunite and smooch. Relationship goals? There's the Alm route and the Celica route. Two routes that drive the main story and end up intertwined in the excellent finale. This is how all games that have dual narratives should be. I want to gush about this game because it did the story presentation so right, and the characters so right, and the maps and the support so right. Thankfully, Nintendo didn't sell 2 copies of the game. You know, they could have been like, ooh, get the Fire Emblem Alm version to take down a corrupt kingdom, and then get Fire Emblem Celica edition to ride a boat and cross a desert and hang out with Emperor Pilaf. Well, they learned their lesson. Bless. The story was no longer fragmented in multiple games. It was all in one game. It can all be done in one playthrough. They learned. We're safe. No more routes. No! Fire Emblem Three Houses. The Fire Emblem game heard around the world. It gave players the decision to experience 4 different story routes. The Black Eagles, the Blue Lions, the Golden Deer, and the Church. 4 different stories. It's really like 3 different stories because the Deer and the Church route is almost exactly the same, but Golden Deer has the better music at the end, so it's better. A game having a bunch of routes? That's cool! I'm intrigued in having multiple viewpoints on the conflict in the world. But each playthrough only changes in the second half of the game? It's only after a 30 to 40 hour segment, which is barely any different, that the story changes? Three Houses is split into 2 parts. The first part, where everyone is happy-go-lucky classmates, fishing tournaments happen, students get kidnapped, and so many other quirky things. And then part 2 is all about war, and part 2 is the biggest change per route because it's a different army in said war. The fact part 1 isn't skippable in any capacity makes me furious. I really like the first part of this game, and I genuinely think it's more fun and exciting than any of the routes part 2. But having to play it 4 separate times to get the whole story is too much. By my 4th playthrough, my eyes were rolling out of my head because it's the same shit. I get why the developers didn't want us to skip the first part. We have to build our units. We have to get to know these characters in different houses. But honestly, I played Blue Lions last, and I can tell you after playing the other 3 routes that I knew the Blue Lions characters pretty damn well by the time I got to their route. Maybe it'd feel more worth it if each route's part 2 had more exclusive content. I mean, yeah, the story's there. The story is mostly unique in each route, but the maps, there are far too few. And I can only suspect it's because the developers didn't have enough time to create more. Maps are reused multiple times in single routes. At launch, there were 98 chapters in the game. A hefty number. We love to see a bunch of chapters in a single game, but only 36 unique maps. The ratio of map to chapter is upsetting. Maps are what make Fire Emblem games for me, so it's safe to say that Three Houses made me very grumpy. Early in the game's release, many fans and reviewers praised the multiple routes of the game. This was early enough where most people had only experienced one route. I mean, when I was one route deep, I too loved the concept of it. But that changed over time, and it isn't just me. I see many fans calling for a Fire Emblem game with a single route, a single story, one perspective. We want to see a game where the entire game's resources are dumped into one cohesive plot. Three Houses was the breaking point. It's the game that made me really stop and put Fire Emblem as a series into perspective. It made me frustrated with any game that advertised routes or branching narratives as a selling point, because 3 houses kind of ruined that for me. I'm sorry for going on longer about 3 houses than the other 2 victims of split routes. I just find it to be the most offensive at the end of the day. Fire Emblem Fates gave us decent variety in gameplay, but at a financial cost. Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia, executed its routes perfectly. And then Fire Emblem 3 Houses gave us routes at the cost of variety. It's been nearly 10 years since we had a mainline game without routes. Fire Emblem Awakening was the last linear one playthrough game, and it was a very good game. Give us a game that's one story. Maybe have a few chapters differ based on a decision, but don't make it more than 10% of the game. I love Fire Emblem, and while I'm a huge advocate for trying new things in game series and putting narrative over gameplay, all I really want is to see a return to traditional Fire Emblem as a break from this new norm. Nintendo saw a Mass Effect and Dragon Age ending and said, "We gotta copy their branching narrative. Which series can we do that with? Fire Emblem! Let's do it!" Honestly, I'm a hypocrite, because back when Awakening came out, I blurted some garbage saying, "Why can't choices matter more in our Fire Emblem games?" And then they did. They began to matter. I got what I asked for. Thank you for listening to me, Nintendo. Now listen to me again. Make a single route Fire Emblem game. Please. If you like this video, I think you'll like my other videos. Maybe. Maybe not. Only one way to find out, am I right? Click on that video, please.